Hey guys, today I'm going to be doing a review on the TV series, Those About to Die. So, before I head into my thoughts and feelings on this season of Those About to Die, quick warning, I do not plan on having any sort of spoilers in this video. I'm going to try and stay away from spoilers as best I can. So yeah, that being said, if you want to stick around, come and watch. So what do you need to know about the TV series Those About to Die? It was a 10-episode season on the Peacock streaming service. Seriously, Peacock is one of those streaming services I rarely get on. I get on there like maybe once a year to watch something. And yeah, the essential synopsis, the basic synopsis of the show, kind of getting down to just the very minimal essence of what the show is about. It's set in Rome, and it follows the dirty business of entertaining the masses through blood and sport. And that's pretty much what the IMDb plot synopsis is. It's, like I said, it's really vague and minimal. There's a lot more going on than that. Our main character that we focus on, he runs like a really successful gambling den. We have our emperor, played by Anthony Hopkins, and his two feuding, battling it out for the throne sons. Yeah, we have a woman trying to protect and save her children, because one is becoming a gladiator and then another is becoming a slave, or both of her daughters become slaves, you know. So yeah, there's a lot of characters in this show. There's a lot of plots going on. Some of it works, some of it doesn't. We'll get into it. So how did I personally feel about this show? You guys, to be honest, I'm really conflicted about it. I think there were elements of the show that it almost kind of started off a little slow for me, but at the same time I wasn't having too much of an issue with it, because it's like, I understand when a show kind of is initially starting off very slow. It's done with the intent, because you have a lot of characters to get through, and you got to establish the characters, and you got to establish the world building, and you got to establish the plot, and that's exactly what this show was doing. So yeah, the pacing was kind of weird in the first couple episodes, and it's like by the time you do get to the halfway point of the show, things do start escalating very quickly, and I do mean escalating very super quickly, to the point that it's almost a little ridiculous, some of the things going on, when weirdly enough, the front half, which is the slower half, I think was far more intriguing at times compared to the ridiculousness that starts happening in the second half, if that makes any sort of sense. But yeah, either way, I was conflicted about the show, but at the same time, was I entertained? I was personally entertained. The show may not work for everybody. Let's be real. It depends on what you're looking for and expecting with this show. Yeah, just know that you're going into this show that it's going to get a little wild and insane, and some things that might just be kind of unbelievable. And yeah, some things are going to work and some things aren't. It's just going to kind of depend on what you're invested in the most in the story, I suppose, and what's the most intriguing to you. But is the show entertaining? For me, I would say that it is definitely at least entertaining. Is it Gladiator level, like amazing? No. And the thing is, another show that's set in Rome that I enjoy, there was a TV show that aired on the Epix. No, not Epix. Well, it was Epix before it became MGM+. The TV show Domina. Domina took place like right after the assassination of Julius Caesar, and it focuses on like the rise of Augustus Caesar, and yeah, mostly focusing a lot on his wife Livia Drusilla and all of her machinations and behind the scenes things that she's doing, kind of almost being the power in Rome in a sense. So that TV show Domina, I would say that is probably the far superior show. If I had to recommend, should you watch Domina or should you watch Those About to Die? I would recommend Domina over Those About to Die, to be quite honest. Now, some of you may be thinking, well, what about the TV show like Rome that was on HBO like a couple decades ago? You know what? I have never seen Rome. you guys, I need to go watch that show because I have heard nothing but good things about that show. I need to sit down one day and try and watch that show because I think it's on HBO Max at the moment. When House of the Dragon is over, I need to try and binge Rome or something. So yeah, looking back down here at my notes, what have I missed here? Chaotic drama. That's I have the words chaotic, chaotic, unnecessary drama wrote down a couple times here in my notes. That's what the season of Those About to Die felt like sometimes. Drama and craziness for the sake of just having drama and craziness when I don't know if it necessarily had to go to some of those places. I honestly don't know. And it's so hard for me to pinpoint exactly and tell you what it is I'm talking about because this is a non-spoiler review. Maybe I should have made this a spoiler review because that way I can downright tell you what exactly was kind of rubbing me the wrong way. But if you're curious, if you have seen this show and you want to have a discussion with me about spoilers, feel free to, because I definitely have a lot to say in regards to spoilery things. So what is the basic, like, thematic elements of this show? I mean, it's set in Rome. The obvious thematic elements you're going to get, it's a story about power, ambition, glory and combat, and a big thing, rising from nothing to be something. So on the thematic side of things, the show definitely excelled in all of that because it is. All of these characters are power hungry. They're super ambitious, and then yeah, even the few scenes that we do get in like the gladiator ring, for instance, yeah, seeing that whole thing, kind of the glory in that, how violence is so glorified, and yeah, if you win, you are somebody, and yeah, like one of our main characters. Played by Iwan Rion, the guy who runs like the really successful gambling den and whatnot. Like, there's a lot of interesting stuff there with his character because he's someone who he came from nothing, but he's trying to make something of himself and he's trying to unbalance the power balance, if you will. He's trying to unbalance the power balance. That's a tongue twister, and it's kind of the thing of, is he going to succeed or not? So you have characters in various different positions of power or lack of power, because you have like the senators at the very top, obviously, and yeah, the emperor and his sons, who are at the extreme top of the chain, and then yeah, you kind of start going lower, and you have the people who are like the entertainers, like the chariot drivers or the gladiators, who have their own kind of status within this world, and yeah. Iwan Rion's character, who's a gambling owner, you know, his certain role in power balance of power, kind of where he's at, you know, and then you have like the slaves who are at the very, very bottom, who have absolutely no power or control. So I like how the show is definitely following that structure, you know, here at the top all the way at the bottom. You get to see every sort of character. Let's talk about the CGI on this show really quickly. I think the CGI on this show was definitely kind of hit or miss in places because it's set in Rome. Obviously, you're going to have a lot of CGI to really give it that depth and scope of what Rome would have looked like during this period. So yeah, it's expected there's going to be CGI, obviously. But yeah, there's moments where it works and where it doesn't. There's something, I don't know, there was something about like whenever there would be characters outside and there would be like sky like back behind them, or you know, the rest of the cityscape back behind them, sometimes there was something about the CGI with those shots in particular that felt really overly glossy, if that makes sense. There was something about those shots that didn't really feel realistic. There was something that kind of felt a little off, that I was like, I feel like that is definitely CGI. Like, where the show excelled was definitely where they were doing more practical things. You know, like you could tell when they had a practical set and were doing practical things within that set, and that's the stuff that definitely worked very well. And yeah, there's like a lion, you guys, without spoiling anything with this lion, there's a lion that's a big, huge kind of thing within the show. The lion is almost kind of its own character, and it's there for thematic purposes for another particular character. And the lion worked when scenes were dark. When scenes were dark, the lion looked great, I think, and I believed in it. But there's like some stuff that happens near the end of the season with the lion, and it's like broad daylight, and then it definitely looks like CGI. It's like, seriously, it made me think of like The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. You know, there's a lion in that movie, voiced by Liam Neeson, and it's a shame that that lion, and that movie came out like what, back in 2001? Didn't The Lion, the Wardrobe come out back in 2001, you guys? And there's something about that CGI that holds up to this day, and I believe that that lion is a lion in that movie. And it's like, why can't we get to that same level now with the better technology that we have? Why did this lion in this show, you know, like over 20 years since Lion the Wardrobe came out, why does this lion look nowhere near as good as the lion in that movie? You know, I don't understand it. And there's a lot of stuff with chariot racing, and that looked good in its own way, but you could definitely tell, like, close-up of the actors during the chariot sequences, they were definitely on a green screen of some sort. Obviously, you can't injure your actors doing a real chariot race. Now, yeah, when there would be far-off shots of chariot racing, a lot of that looked better, I think. It looked better, and I mean, there's probably still a lot of CGI going on in that, but it still looked better at a distance rather than the close-ups, which sometimes looked a little odd. So yeah, the CGI on this show, it's like, it's great in its own way, you know, especially being here on the Peacock streaming network. You know, you can tell they had a really nice budget, but at the same time there are a few little spots where it is very noticeable, I think. Okay, so let's move into the characters, because it's the characters that I really want to sit and talk about, because that was my favorite aspect of the show. Anthony Hopkins, you guys. The trailers tried to make a big point of being like, oh yeah, this is Anthony Hopkins' show. This is not Anthony Hopkins' show, yeah, guys. And I'm going to kind of do a sort of spoiler here, because I think it's important you know this, but at the same time, to my understanding, Anthony Hopkins is playing a real historical figure, and I don't consider history to be a spoiler whatsoever. So yeah, Anthony Hopkins, he's playing an emperor who is pretty old and going pretty senile, it seems. And yeah, within like what, 3 episodes, you guys? Within like 3 episodes, predictably, you can assume this from the get-go, so I don't really consider it a spoiler, especially, you know, because he has his 2 sons who are vying for power. It's pretty obvious Anthony Hopkins is not going to make it through much of the season. So yeah, sure enough, within about like 3 episodes, Anthony Hopkins is out of there, you guys. He is not the star of the show. And I found it a little frustrating with Anthony Hopkins, because it's like, for God's sake, you have Anthony Hopkins, and they didn't really do anything with him. Yeah, guys, I was a little disappointed and frustrated with that. Instead, all they kind of really do with him, they just have him that he's weak and feeble, and he's slowly falling apart, you know. That's kind of the extent of his character, unfortunately. You don't really get to see him at like the height of his powers whatsoever. And poor Anthony Hopkins, seriously, what's up with him? It seems like he always gets cast as being like the dad to two feuding sons, two sons who are vying for power, because all I kept thinking about with his scenes with his 2 sons, I just kept thinking about Thor and Loki, you guys. You know, the Marvel movies, because he played Odin in the Thor movies, and yeah, Thor and Loki, Chris Hemsworth and Tom Hiddleston, you guys. I just kept thinking about Thor the entire time when Anthony Hopkins was on screen. That's all I kept thinking about. I was like, this is just Thor set in ancient Rome, and I was kind of here for it. So yeah, the actual star of this show is Ewan Ryan, who plays a guy who runs a really successful gambling den. Yeah, Ewan Ryan, you guys. I loved him in Game of Thrones. I loved him as Ramsay Bolton. So it was super fun to see him as the lead of this show. And he's playing a very complex character, because there's sometimes you like him, sometimes you hate him, sometimes you're questioning his motives, like, that's good, that's bad. He's a very, very intriguing, complex character, and I love that. He's definitely really morally dubious and morally gray, if you will. Seriously, I love the complexity of his character. 10X is his name. 10X is just super compelling, super interesting. You're not quite sure what he's going to do, but you just know that he's really ambitious. You know, 10X is super ambitious. He's a guy who came from nothing. He's trying to make something of himself and trying to really push down the elite, if you will, you know, because there's a whole thing that how it's presented on this show, there's like different factions, and they're all like color coded. Like there's like people who are like part of this blue faction or a red faction or a white faction. There's like about 4 of them, and like all of the senators are all like in each different one. You know, like when they're watching chariot races and gladiator competitions, you know, it's how they all bet. They're it's in color coded. It's like done in a color coded sort of way, and that's how they bet and who gets which side gets money, I guess, from the betting. I don't know. And yeah, Ten-Ax's whole thing is he wants to make a new color faction. And yeah, it's really scandalous him kind of doing that, him putting himself in a higher position than what he should be in. So I love that whole thing with his side quest of trying to make a new color faction and yet making money for himself. You know, the gambling den, the money comes in, and it's not like it's really his money that he's profiting from in some ways. So yeah, it's at a thing like, okay, I need to make money for me. So yeah, what I'm trying to say, Ewan Rion's performance in this entire show, you guys, was definitely spectacular, and I loved it. I love the complexity, and again, I love seeing him with this leading role. Just really great for him as an actor, I think. And you guys, my 2 favorite characters, predictably so, you know, guys, I have a thing for brothers who are vying for power and they're bickering and arguing. I have a thing for that, okay? So my 2 favorite characters were Titus, played by Tom Hughes, who is so gorgeous. I love Tom Hughes, you guys. Oh my god. And Domitian, played by Jojo Macari. I freaking loved this whole side plot with the 2 ambitious, power-hungry brothers. And like I already mentioned, it felt like Thor in ancient Rome, because obviously they both kept making me think of like Thor and Loki from the Marvel movies. And then yeah, I've been sitting here watching House of the Dragon. They were making me think of Aegon and Aemond. So yeah, I love this sort of stuff with brothers. If the show had been all like Ewan Rion, his whole thing, and yeah, these brothers, I would have been totally here for it. Everybody else I could have done without, you know? I would have been totally happy with this show if it was just the brothers bickering, arguing the whole time. So yeah, they were definitely a huge highlight for me. We have Titus, like I said, played by Tom Hughes. Titus is the one, he's assuming he's going to be the next in charge once his father dies, that he's going to be the next emperor. But there's a lot of kind of back and forth kind of in the beginning stages of the season. Is that going to happen? Is something going to change to shift that the emperor's going to choose his younger son instead, you know? So I love the power dynamics between the brothers, the back and forth, the complexity between them, the backstabbing between them. And yeah, Tom Hughes's performance, I loved his performance because he's playing Titus in such a way that he is the guy who should be in charge, but he's also a rather oblivious character at times, because he's coming at things from the military point of view and kind of neglecting other sort of things that he's not kind of totally aware of. Whereas like the character of Domitian, played by Jojo Macari, Domitian he's out there kind of within the masses, and he's watching like the gladiator tournaments and the chariot tournaments, and he is kind of much more aware of the minds and actions of the people and what the people want. But yeah, he's the much more conniving, duplicitous, manipulating brother, you know? So it's like, he probably shouldn't really be in charge, you know? So I love kind of that back and forth, like which brother should be the next emperor. And yeah, Jojo Macari as Domitian, you guys, his performance, I loved how unhinged he was. He was just so unhinged and just so fun to watch. Yeah, again, him and Titus's relationship, seriously, I'm here for it. Like I said, definitely giving me those vibes of Thor and Loki from Marvel, and Aemond and Aegon from House of the Dragon. I was totally here for it. So moving on, a character that I was very pleasantly surprised with, that I kind of went into the show thinking, oh, I'm not really going to care for this character or this story. The character of Kala, I think is how her name was pronounced. Kala, played by Sarah Martins. Again, I was very pleasantly surprised with this performance and with this story, because when you're first introduced to Kala in the first couple episodes, she's not really kind of a big, huge character at first, because her daughters end up getting captured and they're sold to be slaves. So she takes off to try and buy them back, which doesn't go very well, because even though she gets a nice amount of money, it's still not enough to compete with, like, the senators who have more money than her. So she's trying to get back her daughters who have been sold into slavery, plus her son has been sold into, like, the gladiator ring. So all of her children are just all over the place here in Rome, and she's trying to get them all back. She's trying to reunite her family. So at first I thought the show was going to be much, much more focused on her children, but weirdly enough, her children are barely even focused on in this show. Yeah, guys, the one son is focused on the most, but yeah, the daughters are kind of neglected and pushed to the background the majority of the time. So yeah, Kala is kind of, after Iwan Rion, Kala is kind of your next big, huge, major character in this story. And I really loved her plight. I loved her plight and her journey. She's there doing everything for her children. Because she interacts with Iwan Rion, Tinax. She interacts with Tinax the most, and yeah, she's kind of doing her own plotting and scheming and manipulating of him at times, because he is kind of the one who is getting things rolling, and he has a certain amount of power and control that he can kind of help her out to get her children back, So I really liked their dynamic together and their chemistry, and yeah, especially where it ends. You guys, it ends at a really interesting place with the two of them. Yeah, I definitely really liked her character quite immensely. Definitely one of the more interesting female characters on this show, I think. Okay, you guys, we gotta talk about Scorpus. Oh my, Scorpus, played so magnificently by the gorgeous Dimitri Leonidas. Yeah, guys, Dimitri Leonidas. Scorpus is the comedic relief, I think, on this show. Even though he goes to some pretty dark places, he's kind of the comedic relief. Dimitri Leonidas plays Scorpus as a character who is really vain and shallow and arrogant. The thing you gotta know about Scorpus, he is one of the chariot racers, and he's very arrogant, and the thing is, he's a celebrity. He has what would be celebrity here in ancient Rome with these chariot races, because when he's just walking around on the streets, just really casually, if you listen in the background of any given scene that he's in, there'll always be a bunch of women in the background shouting like, "Oh, Scorpus, hi Scorpus," he has a legion of fangirls. Both men and women love him. He is a celebrity here in Rome through the chariot racing, because he wins a lot. He pretty much wins all the time. He's practically unbeatable except for a few occasions. So I loved how Dimitri Leonidas played Scorpus. He was absolutely hysterical and hilarious. I adored him. And as a fun side note, I was really amused with this as well, because Iwan Rion and Dimitri Leonidas, there was a show that they were in together, called Riviera. It was a Julia Stiles TV show, but yeah, the two of them, Dimitri Leonidas and Iwan Rion, they played brothers in that show. And again, I love bickering brothers, and they played bickering brothers on that show. So I was really thrilled to see them reunited here on this show. Not as brothers, but still. But yeah, seriously, Scorpus was definitely one of those highlight characters for me. Anytime he was on screen, I loved it. And he never spoke, he never said, I do this, I do that, He always just referred to himself like, "Oh, Scorpus this, Scorpus that." So that was another little quirk with his character, just the way he spoke. Because he just believed himself like he was this great god or something. And that's kind of it for your big major characters. This show has a huge, extensive cast of characters, you guys, and if I sit and go through every single person, this video is going to be super long. It's already long enough as it is. But yeah, all you need to know, other random characters that you have on this show, you have Kala's children, which have their own kind of plots going on. Like I said, two of them, the girls, are sold into slavery, and then the one guy is sold into the gladiator ring and whatnot. And then yeah, you have other gladiators within that who have their own roles. You have other chariot drivers that are in competition with Scorpus, and yeah, there's a trio of some brothers from Spain. They're bringing in some horses, and they become stable hands for the chariot races and whatnot. The brothers cameras have their own thing going off in the background. Yeah, of course, you have your little slew of senators, and you have the senators' wives. Again, just kind of random citizens that commentate on things. Because especially there's like there's a pair of guys that whenever they're at the gladiator tournaments or the chariot tournaments, the camera always makes a point of focusing on them and like their commentary of like, oh, I'm betting on this person to win. Oh, this person has no chance. You know, like they're just random citizens. You know, so this show there's a huge host of characters, and it kind of gets a little overwhelming and ridiculous on occasion. Like who are your main characters? Who should you be focusing on? You know, so overall, Those About to Die was a good time for me personally. I was entertained. I liked it. It's not perfect. Let's definitely put that out there. Those About to Die is definitely not a perfect show. It definitely has its flaws, but it worked for me. And yeah, if it has a second season, I'll definitely watch it. I was intrigued enough to be like, oh, what's going to happen after this? Is it going to get a second season? I almost have a feeling it's going to get canceled. If it gets canceled, I'm not going to be surprised. But yeah, if we do get a second season, I will totally watch it, because I'm just kind of curious where certain arcs and stories are going to go. So you guys, that is it for my thoughts and feelings on Those About to Die. In the comments below, did any of you happen to watch this show? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Were you kind of somewhere in the middle? Just let me know. And again, if you want to talk about some spoilers, please, by all means, talk about spoilers with me down below. So that's it for this video. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And if you like this video, you may like these other videos. Bye, guys.